shy intern, accidentally sat at the VIP table, unaware the man she complained about was the CEO sitting beside her. Natalie's voice trembled as she approached a table draped in emerald linens at the Bloom Group year-end gala. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers and polite laughter, the air thick with polished introductions. Clutching her champagne flute, Natalie smoothed her modest emerald dress and scanned the crowd. Everyone wore suits or gowns. She couldn't tell who was who. She unknowingly took a seat at the VIP table. Across from her sat a man in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He seemed younger than most executives, and carried himself with such quiet ease that she assumed he was either a fellow newcomer or part of the catering staff. He nodded as she sat, his demeanor calm. As conversations buzzed around them, Natalie muttered, "Honestly, Bloom's marketing feels fake. Those farm stories and sustainability lines, all fluff. Real transparency wouldn't need so much spin." She glanced sideways and realized he was listening. "Sorry," she added quickly. He smiled. "No need to apologize. It's rare to hear anything genuine at these events." She exhaled, then continued, "Half the directors remind me of uncles with swollen egos, faces like they just sniffed spoiled milk." The man beside her nearly choked on his drink but recovered with a laugh. "That's a vivid image." "I'm Natalie," she said, cheeks pink. "Intern, marketing." "Lucian Blake," he replied casually. "Nice to meet you." Still unaware of who he was, she relaxed and talked more, about the disconnect between glossy ads and real customer experience, how employees felt like extras in a scripted story. Lucian listened, asking thoughtful questions. His gaze didn't drift like the others. His attention calmed her. As the quartet played softly, she leaned in. "You're not like the others here," she said. "You don't seem like someone scanning the room to fire people." He laughed. "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me all night." Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. When the waiter arrived with entrees, Lucien offered her the roasted vegetable plate instead of the salmon without a word. She accepted gratefully. "I feel lucky to be here," she confessed later. "But I wonder if Bloom will ever mean what it says." Lucian didn't reply right away. He reached for a napkin and gently slid it toward her across the table, subtle but kind. After dinner, he stood and extended his hand. "That was the most honest conversation I've had in a long time." She shook it, still clueless to his identity. "Thank you," she whispered, smiling. They parted with no ceremony. Natalie walked away to find her department. Lucien stayed, watching her go, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She had no idea what was about to happen. Moments later, the MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "Please welcome the CEO of Bloom Group, Mr. Lucian Blake." Natalie froze. Her wineglass trembled in her hand. Her memory replayed every word she had said, every joke, every critique. She stared at the stage, and there he was, her dinner companion, the CEO. Her heart dropped. She slipped a folded note under his dinner plate and fled the ballroom without a word. The note read, "I am truly sorry. Please forget everything I said." As Lucien stepped to the podium, his gaze swept the room until it landed briefly on the retreating figure of Natalie at the far end. His voice caught for just a moment, but he continued. Not angry, not ashamed, just thoughtful, and something had shifted between them, though neither fully understood it yet. Natalie raised her glass just as the stage lights dimmed, caught in that expectant hush only corporate galas possess. And there was something in that hush that persuaded 20 men from the corporate galas possess. When the master of ceremonies spoke, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Bloom Group, Mr. Lucian Blake." A hush fell over the room, and a spotlight hit the podium. Natalie froze. The man at the head table, the one she'd talked with so casually, was Lucian Blake, the company's founder and public face. Her heart pounded. The sight of him stepping forward in polished black tuxedo seared her memory. The familiar polished suit, the same face she'd dismissed as an intern or someone from catering. She squeezed the stem of her champagne flute so hard it trembled in her hand. The room erupted in applause. Lucian lifted the microphone, projecting confidence. But Natalie could no longer hear his words. Instead, she saw herself, every bold, reckless comment she'd made about internal policies, about so-called unethical marketing strategies, about his belly, his ancient image of a CEO. She swallowed, mind racing. She didn't wait for the applause to fade. Smiling awkwardly, she slid from her seat. With trembling fingers, she dropped a small, folded note under the silver charger plate at Lucien's seat. It said, "I am truly sorry. Please forget everything I said." Then she slipped out before the next course arrived. From the stage, Lucien paused mid-sentence. His gaze swept the ballroom, lingering on the path Natalie had taken toward the exit. For a heartbeat, time froze. His eyes betrayed something unexpected. Regret? Concern? A flicker of admiration. Then he shook himself, cleared his throat, and resumed speaking. His voice was calm but softer than before. Downstairs in the lobby, Natalie's breathing was sharp as she clutched her clutch bag. She felt frozen. The sight of co-workers congratulating each other near the entrance hurt. She felt like invisible glass between them. She fumed. "I'll be fired tomorrow. 15,000 applicants for this internship. Now just 12 months of soaked resumes and proud lies to family." She bit her lip and hoped to vanish beneath the archway. A valet slipped her coat over her shoulders in silence. She fled the hotel steps, the wind tearing at her hair, street lamps casting her ghost-like silhouette on the pavement. Her breath caught as she searched for an Uber, but her hands shook too much to open the app. She pressed her cheek to the hotel glass doors and considered ringing the doorbell to apologize in person, but she feared what she'd only just found out, that the man she'd insulted was the most powerful figure in the company. Inside, Lucien lowered the mic. His speech continued but lost resonance. His gaze stayed at the direction Natalie had gone. He studied the empty seat she left behind. He should be angry, yet he felt something else. Curiosity mixed with a strange tenderness. This intern had spoken truth where flattery was expected. She had been fearless in a room full of rehearsed politeness. Minutes later, after applause and formal toasts, Lucien stepped off the stage. He walked toward the table Natalie had sat at. On the charger plate lay the note. He picked it up with a gloved hand. His eyes softened as he read. Outside, Natalie leaned against a wrought iron fence near the hotel entrance, trying to breathe without crying. Rain misted around her, a soft cleansing, perhaps. She whispered into the night, "I'm sorry." Then she walked on, uncertain how to get home, or if she even deserved a job tomorrow. Back inside, Lucien folded the note and placed it in his suit pocket. He stood in the dim dining hall and watched colleagues laugh and serve desserts. The bustle felt surreal. A part of him ached, knowing she had judged him so openly, and yet there was no anger in him. There was only a wish to know why she was so honest, to understand the woman willing to risk everything for truth, even her career. He leaned against the mantel and closed his eyes. He could not run after her, not now, not here, but he vowed silently, tomorrow he would reach out. Another moment lost in the anonymity of large halls was too much. Natalie disappeared into the night, convinced her future there had ended. Lucien watched through the window, the empty table across from him, a quiet question he could not ignore. Lucien Blake stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, overlooking the glittering skyline of downtown Chicago. The champagne in his hand had long since gone flat. Behind him, the lavish apartment was quiet, too quiet. He should have been feeling triumphant. The gala had gone smoothly, the board impressed, and the quarterly numbers promising, but his mind remained stuck on one voice, sharp, unfiltered, and unexpectedly refreshing. Natalie Winters. He had replayed her words a dozen times in his head. I imagined the CEO would be some grumpy old man with a beer belly and a voice like he gargles gravel every morning. He chuckled to himself now, recalling how hard he had to fight not to spit out his wine. But more than her humor, it was the sincerity in her voice that lingered. Lucien crossed to his desk and powered up his laptop. A few keystrokes later, Natalie's intern profile appeared. Degree in communications, top 1% of her class, fluent in French, started at Bloom Group just 3 months ago. No internal complaints, no red flags. Just one folder with glowing peer reviews. He leaned back in his chair. So why had her words struck such a chord? Because she was right. Her comments about vague branding, recycled slogans, and fear-based marketing hit closer to home than most consultants he had paid handsomely. She did not know who he was, and she had spoken anyway. No filter, no agenda, just truth, and that made her dangerous or brilliant. Meanwhile, across town, Natalie was curled up on the kitchen floor of her shared apartment, her head buried in her arms as she sobbed into her sleeves. The tattered invitation to the gala still sat on the counter, untouched since she flung her purse down an hour ago. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "Did you commit a felony?" Zoe, her best friend and roommate, asked from the doorway, munching on cereal. "Did you punch someone? Accidentally burn down a centerpiece?" "No," Natalie moaned. "Worse. I trash-talked the CEO to his face for 20 minutes. Zoe paused. "Wait, the actual CEO?" Natalie lifted her tear-streaked face and nodded. "Lucian Blake. I thought he was a waiter or maybe another intern, so I said all kinds of stuff, horrible stuff." Zoe raised a brow. "Okay, that is impressive. Bold, reckless. Also very on-brand for you." "This isn't funny," Natalie groaned. "I didn't say it was funny," Zoe replied, trying not to grin. "But think about it. You, the shy intern with a garden on the balcony and panic attacks in elevators, just had a one-on-one dinner with the CEO. That's practically a rom-com setup." Natalie glared. "This isn't a movie. I'm not the quirky underdog who magically wins the heart of the mysterious billionaire boss. He's going to fire me. If not tomorrow, then by the end of the week. I left a note under his plate like some panicked middle schooler." Zoe shrugged. "You told the truth. Maybe that's exactly what he needed to hear." In the quiet that followed, Natalie stood and poured herself a glass of water. She replayed the dinner. His amused eyes, the way he listened, the warm way he had said, "Please, join me," and then the way he had looked at her from the stage. Like he knew her. Like he saw her. "Even if he doesn't fire you," Natalie muttered, "he'll never forget what I said." Across town, Lucine sat alone, rereading her note. Please forget everything she had written. But he could not. Because it had been real, raw, and in a room full of corporate masks and practiced charm, Natalie had given him something he rarely received: honesty. He thought of her voice again, not angry, just disappointed. In the system, in the leadership, in him. He did not feel insulted. He felt awakened. For the first time in a long while, Lucien did not want another strategic brief or filtered report. He wanted another conversation with Natalie Winters. Not to reprimand her, but to hear what else she thought, to see what else he had missed. Natalie hugged the file folders tighter to her chest as her heels clicked softly against the marble floors of the Bloom Group's executive wing. She had no reason to be there, well, no scheduled reason. She had been sent to drop off reports to the department head 2 doors down. A quick in and out. That was the plan. Until she saw him. Lucien Blake was walking toward her from the opposite end of the corridor, tall and composed, in a slate-gray suit that fit like it had been tailored by the gods themselves. Natalie's heart seized. Her first instinct was to look down, to speed up, to vanish, as she always had in corridors like these. But as they drew nearer, something made her glance up just enough to meet his gaze. He stopped a few feet from her and said, with the same calm tone he'd used over dinner, "I've been thinking about what you said, about the marketing policies." Natalie's eyes widened. She hadn't expected acknowledgement, let alone continuation. I'm really sorry again," she stammered, voice barely above a whisper. He gave her a gentle, amused smile. "Don't be. That was the most honest dinner conversation I've had in years. I appreciated it more than you know." Her cheeks flushed crimson. There was a beat of silence. She nodded, unsure of what to say, and began to walk past, but Lucien's voice stopped her again. "We're forming a small internal strategy group," he said. "I'd like you to be part of it. Fresh eyes, remember?" She turned, brows raised in surprise. "Me? But I'm just a sharp mind with a unique perspective," he said simply. "Think about it." She nodded, still unsure if she was in a dream. Later that week, Natalie found herself seated at a long oak conference table with 5 senior staff members and Lucien at the head. He had given her a place right beside him. At first, she said little, observing, listening, learning the rhythm of executive discussions. But then came a moment, an awkward pause after a senior VP floated a dull, outdated branding concept. Natalie cleared her throat, tentatively offered a suggestion. Lucien leaned forward. "Go on," he said. He did not interrupt. He did not rush her. He let her finish, and when she did, he nodded thoughtfully and said, "That's the direction I want to explore." The room quieted. A few exchanged glances, but no one challenged it. From then on, Natalie's presence in the meetings shifted. She became a contributor, a voice, someone the CEO invited to walk with him after discussions, debriefing ideas and tossing out what-ifs. It wasn't just professional, though she fought to keep it that way. There were small moments, shared glances over a laptop when their hands accidentally brushed, reaching for the same mouse. A soft laugh from Lucien when she muttered under her breath during a tedious brainstorming session. The way his eyes lingered on her a second too long when she presented a concept with conviction. And then, one morning, she arrived at her desk to find a small, leather-bound notebook sitting neatly on her keyboard. No note, no explanation, just a single phrase, embossed in gold lettering on the front. "Write down the truths you're afraid to say out loud." She knew it was from him. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened to the first page. Blank. Waiting. Natalie stared at the empty lines for a long moment, then closed it with a quiet breath. Lucien Blake was becoming more than a name in a boardroom. He was becoming a presence in her thoughts, a constant hum in the background of her day. She caught herself smiling at the memory of his dry humor, the way he listened, really listened, without ever making her feel small, and the way he never once brought up her galligaff again, not to mock, not to dangle, not even as a warning, but feelings for the CEO? She was an intern, a nobody in the corporate machine, and he was Lucien Blake. Natalie slid the notebook into her bag and stared out the window of her cubicle. Her heart felt light, but her chest heavy. What was she doing? And why, despite every logical warning screaming in her brain, did it feel so good to be seen? The hallway was unusually quiet for a Thursday morning. Natalie had just stepped out of the elevator when she heard her name, Natalie Winters. You know, the intern who suddenly became the CEO's favorite? You really think it's her ideas that got her that seat? A short laugh followed. "Please, wake up. She probably warmed his bed before she warmed that boardroom chair." Another voice joined in. "You see how often they're seen together now? She doesn't even try to hide it. I mean, come on. The guy's single. She's young, ambitious. Do the math." Natalie froze behind the corner wall, the blood draining from her face. The words sliced through her like cold steel. Her name, her worth, reduced to a dirty implication, dismissed, diminished. Her face burned with shame, but her stomach churned with something else, hurt, deep and raw. She had earned nothing in her life easily. Every step had been carved through hard work, through anxiety and long nights and second-guessing herself. She had never taken a shortcut, never played games, never even let herself hope someone like Lucien could look at her with anything more than professionalism. And yet... A second of silence passed. Footsteps approached from the other end of the hallway, unmistakably polished and deliberate. Lucien. He walked past her without a word, but not without hearing. He had caught enough, his jaw had clenched ever so slightly, his eyes unreadable. For a second, she thought he might say something to the group huddled near the coffee station. He did not. He simply continued down the hallway as if nothing had happened. Natalie didn't wait. She turned on her heel, stormed into the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and buried her face in her hands. She called in sick that afternoon, and the next day she sent an email to HR requesting 1 day of personal leave. The following morning, she didn't set an alarm. She stayed in her pajamas, curled up on her tiny couch, staring out the window at a gray Seattle sky. Her phone buzzed twice, Zoe checking in. She ignored both. She couldn't stop hearing their voices, couldn't stop wondering if Lucien believed it too, even just a little, that she was where she was because of proximity, not merit, that she had cheapened herself, that everything she'd worked for, every truth she'd dared to speak, was now buried under a smear of gossip and shame. At noon, a delivery arrived. A white envelope. No logo. Just her name, handwritten. Inside was a photograph. A candid black and white shot of the table by the window at the gala, the same one she'd sat at, unwittingly confessing her thoughts to a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. The image was soft, almost nostalgic. You could see the empty wine glasses, the untouched dessert, her clutch resting on the tablecloth. Beneath the photo, written in Lucien's crisp, careful handwriting, "I believed in your voice before I knew your name." Natalie's fingers trembled as she reread the words. Once, twice, a third time. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't an apology. It was a truth, not about what the world said, but about what he saw. Something inside her shifted. She returned to work the next day. She walked through the office with her head held high, not defiantly, but firmly, steadily. She didn't avoid the whisperers. She didn't need to explain anything. She had nothing to be ashamed of. When she stepped into the meeting room, Lucien was already there, seated at the head of the table. Their eyes met for the first time in days. He did not smile. Neither did she. But she held his gaze, and this time, there was no fear in hers, only clarity, only strength. And something else flickering quietly in the space between them. Respect. The office was bathed in amber light. Outside the glass walls, the Seattle skyline sparkled under a velvet sky. Most of the team had gone home, but Natalie stayed behind, fine-tuning a proposal due the next morning. She rubbed her temples and sighed softly. Lucien appeared in the doorway, 2 coffees in hand. "You're still here," he said, offering her one. "So are you," she replied with a tired smile, accepting the cup. They sat in quiet for a while, side by side, the hum of computers and distant city noise the only sound. Then Natalie said something she had never told anyone at Bloom. "My mom's sick." Lucien looked at her, not with pity but full attention. "She has a degenerative nerve condition. It's slow but irreversible. Some days she can't even hold a cup of tea." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "She raised me alone. 2 jobs. No college for her. Just grit and duct tape holding life together. I got into UW on a partial scholarship, but when she got worse," Natalie took a shaky breath, "I dropped out in my 2nd year, moved home, started working. Marketing was the fastest thing I could get trained for that didn't require a full degree." Lucien said nothing. "I've always felt behind," she continued. "Like I'm playing catch-up with all these people with perfect resumes, shiny degrees, networks they were born into. I guess that's why I keep my head down. Pretend if I blend in enough, no one will notice the gaps." Lucien didn't interrupt. He just watched her, the way he always did, with a kind of deliberate stillness. When she finally glanced over, he reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. "You're stronger than any resume I've ever read." She blinked. A rush of emotion surged behind her eyes, but she managed to keep it contained. The rest of the night passed in companionable quiet. The next morning, Natalie arrived at her desk to find the small white envelope in her drawer. No company logo, no typed font. Just her name, handwritten. Inside was a folded card. On the front, in soft watercolor, was a delicate image of a mother and daughter sitting beneath a tree. Inside, it read, "To your mom, wishing her health, strength, and all the love in the world, from someone who believes in her daughter." Natalie covered her mouth with her hand. She stared at the message for a long time. Then, without warning, the tears came. Not because she was sad, but because she had never expected anyone to see her so clearly, or to care this quietly. For so long she had equated vulnerability with weakness, truth with exposure. But Lucian had responded not with judgment, or pity, or grand gestures, just belief. And in that moment, Natalie allowed herself the thought she had been avoiding for weeks. Maybe this is the man meant for me. The auditorium echoed with applause as Natalie and Lucian stepped off the stage, their presentation at the International Sustainability Summit in New York a complete success. Reporters and colleagues gathered, congratulating them on the clarity and conviction in their message. But amid the buzz, Natalie only noticed Lucian's glance, quiet, proud, and somehow grounding. Later that evening, after the gala dinner and too many polite handshakes, Lucian turned to her. "You've never been to Central Park at night, have you?" Natalie shook her head, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Only in movies." "Well," he said, offering his arm, "let's give the movies some competition." The night air outside was cool, crisp, with the breath of late autumn. The city lights shimmered off glass towers, but inside the park, things were softer, quieter. Their footsteps echoed lightly on the pathway as they walked under golden street lamps and trees losing their final leaves. "You were brilliant today," Lucian said, breaking the silence. Natalie looked away, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You made it easier." "No," he replied, "you made it honest." They strolled in companionable quiet until a gust of wind made Natalie shiver. Without a word, Lucian shrugged off his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised. "Thank you." He nodded, and for a moment he didn't look like a CEO, not a high-pounder suit-clad executive, just a man, thoughtful, present, real. "I used to think," she said softly, "that the only way I could survive corporate life was to shrink small enough that no one noticed I was there. But you see me, and not as someone broken or fragile or waiting to be rescued." Lucian stopped walking. "That's because you're none of those things," he said, his voice low. "You've walked through fire. You just don't brag about the burns." Her eyes searched his, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not trying to fix me." A pause. The wind swirled around them. "I never wanted to fix you," he said. "I just wanted to know you." And then, slowly, he lifted his hand to her cheek, fingers warm against the chill, eyes asking without demanding. She leaned into his touch, and under the quiet sky of New York, they kissed. It was gentle, hesitant at first, like an unspoken truth finally given breath. But in that moment, Natalie felt her chest open, not with fear, but something terrifyingly beautiful: trust. When they parted, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "We're breaking every HR policy," Natalie murmured. Lucian chuckled softly. "Then let's do it with honesty." They walked back through the park with her wrapped in his coat, neither speaking much, but everything had changed. Returning to the office the following Monday, they didn't speak of that night, not openly, not yet. But something unspoken hung in the air between them. The way he looked at her during meetings, the way she smiled when she passed his office. They had agreed, silently, to protect whatever this was, not because it was shameful, but because it was fragile and worth preserving. To their colleagues, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but the ones who paid close attention might have noticed the way Natalie's eyes lit up during brainstorming sessions, or how Lucienne lingered just a little longer at her desk to ask, "How's your mom today?" Love wasn't loud in their world. It was quiet, respectful, and unfolding in its own time. But under it all, they both knew. What began with a mistake at the VIP table had turned into the most honest connection either of them had ever known. The announcement came on a crisp Monday morning, but it had been months in the making. Natalie Winters was officially named creative manager of Bloom Group's rebranded division. The email from HR used words like innovation, integrity, and vision, but Natalie only remembered one: earned. Her promotion wasn't just a title change. It was a recognition of the journey she'd taken, from a shy intern who stumbled into the wrong seat to the woman who had become the voice of something new. Lucienne had told her, months ago, write down the truths you're afraid to say out loud. Now she was inviting the entire company to do just that. Their joint initiative, Your Voice Matters, launched with quiet but radical intent. Through anonymous submissions, employees could share ideas, frustrations, and hopes without fear of reprisal. Lucienne's condition had been clear. Every voice would be heard and responded to. Feedback poured in. Some entries were silly, like the demand for better coffee in the break room. Others were heartbreaking, stories of burnout, of overlooked efforts, of wanting to matter. Natalie read every submission, sometimes with tears, sometimes with laughter, always with care. The campaign gained traction far beyond the company. Business publications hailed it as a breakthrough in internal communications. One magazine called it an emotional audit, disguised as a feedback form. Natalie just called it honesty. Late one evening, after the final proposal for the next phase of the campaign had been approved, Lucien entered her office. He was holding something behind his back. "Remember this?" he asked, revealing a small, weathered notebook. Her breath caught. It was the one he'd given her after their awkward reintroduction, the one with the inscription, "Write down the truths you're afraid to say out loud." She hadn't opened it since. Now a single sheet of paper lay folded inside. Her name was written in his handwriting. She unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a letter. It was a vow, a messy, heartfelt vow, written in pen that smudged slightly where a palm had pressed too hard. "You sat at the wrong table and made everything right. Will you marry me?" Natalie looked up at him, eyes wide. "I wanted the words to be in a place that started it all," he said, voice quiet. "Some truths are worth writing down. Others are worth living." She smiled through the tears. Yes. The wedding was small, exactly as they wanted it. It was held in the courtyard garden of Bloom Group's headquarters, where flowers climbed trellises, fairy lights draped between trees, and familiar colleagues smiled from rows of white chairs. The ceremony wasn't grand, but it was right. Natalie wore a dress the color of fresh linen. Lucienne looked at her like she was the only thing blooming. At the center of the garden, one table stood out. It was the table where they'd first met, now adorned with a simple sign, VIP, for those who speak from the heart. As they exchanged vows, Natalie felt not nervous, not afraid, but seen. Truly, finally, and beautifully seen. Some stories begin with mistaken identities, with awkward confessions, with the wrong seat at the wrong table. But the best stories, they end with truth, with kindness, and with two people who learn that being real is the most courageous act of all. And in this corner of the world, between emails, strategy meetings, and corporate elevators, a little more love and a lot more truth had taken root. Forever. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the quiet power of honesty, kindness, and love found in the most unexpected places, then we invite you to stay connected. At Soul Stirring Stories, we believe that even a small, genuine voice can spark powerful change, whether it's a nervous intern at a gala or a CEO learning to listen again. Every story we share is crafted to uplift, inspire, and heal. So if you enjoyed Natalie and Lucien's journey, from accidental seatmates to soulmates, please hit the like button, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories just like this one. And remember, sometimes the seat you stumble into turns out to be the beginning of everything. Subscribe now to Soul Stirring Stories, where every story is a step closer to the heart.